Are you guys ready? We're good? All right. So, if you don't know, I'm Erin from Windsor Plywood. We are filming for a Facebook and YouTube stream. So just so you guys know, that's why the tape is there. As long as they can see what I'm doing, we'll be good to go. You can come in and look and then kind of head back. But let's just start with the 3 types of epoxy that Epoxy has. So down at the bottom, down here, is the UV epoxy. That one is strictly a thin pour. So you're not pouring it more than 1/4 of an inch thick. What happens is the chemical reaction will heat up and then it'll flash cure if you pour it too thick. So that is the only one of the epoxies, and it's the light blue container, that is a 1-to-1 ratio. So when I say 1-to-1, you can do it to the milliliter. I've done it to like drawing a Sharpie line on a container, and as long as I fill each A and B up to that same line, that's about as accurate as I've been. Works out fine. As long as you've got your A and your B and you mix it well together. So, and then we've got up here, we've got the 2 deeper pour castings. So this lighter teal blue one is called Flowcast SPR. So SPR stands for Small Project Resin. So the deal with that is all of the people that are doing small pours kind of like this, or more of a weekend warrior, not trying to do like the massive tables and stuff like that. Totally can be done, but you can only pour 3 liters at a time. Anything other than that, the chemical structure doesn't work. So that's why that one is the SPR. This is the traditional Flowcast. It is for your deep projects. So if you want to do a 30-liter pour, by all means, buy a 30-liter kit. You can pour 30 liters at a time. We've poured 65 before, so we mixed in a garbage pail and we poured a table. It was a big pour and it was a lot of work, but it worked out really well. The only issue we had was we didn't regulate the temperature of the building where we poured, so a heater came on and then it cured a lot faster than the 3 days was supposed to happen. Even if it flash cures, it doesn't matter as much because it's still, the epoxy's still gonna be hard, it's still gonna be structurally sound. We made it into a fir table, it was the river, right? So it still was no problems with that. All right, so those are our 3 kind of major deals with the epoxy. Any questions?
How thick can you pour?
This one, you can pour inch, they say 1.5 inches, 1 3/4. If you cool your temperature down, there is a whole like graph, and I have it if anybody wants to pour 3 inches. Anything over 3, I'd be really hard because you can't get the airflow it needs to not cure immediately.
So when you're pouring something like
this?
No, like this.
Yeah. It's a small that you can keep cool. As you can see in mine, I've got different layers because I use my leftovers, but you can pour it all at once and it's still going to take your 3 days because it's got enough area to cool down.
Okay.
So smaller stuff.
That was just
sitting out, and not by a big heater or anything like that, right? We had another one, the blocks. Where are my blocks? Yeah, those ones. So yeah, this was also poured with that. So it's a solid block. I tried to make it like opaque so you could kind of see through it, but still learning my mixtures. I've been pouring epoxy for about 10 years now, and I'm still learning how much color to add to be able to see through a piece. Because when you pour on something that's got something below it, you never really know what your color is going to be. They did come out, Epoxy came out with a white tape, so then you could kind of see through a little bit better than the red, which adds some color. I've just always used the tuck tape, so most of this is reused. So like this is a reused kind of mold that I kind of divided up for this. So yeah, just stick her anywhere. Thanks. And then we have the different colorants. That's the other thing I should go through. So they have a solid pigment, right? So this is like what paint pigment is. Couple drops goes a long way into it. And you can mix it in with like the metallic pigments. So the metallics are always going to give you something that's kind of swirly. It's got like, you know, something like that, right? You're always going to have swirls in the ocean scenes. This is a metallic pigment, so you can kind of draw on it. This is metallic. It was just left in there. There was no drawings to it, so it always gives you that kind of look. Whereas the solid, if you use it alone, looks like a paint. So those are kind of some of the differences. And then they do have a glitter. I haven't used glitter that much because I still haven't found too much of a purpose, unless you're using it for jewelry or something like that, right? So those are the additions that you can use. People have used all sorts of different things. If you want to try something different, go for it. I just don't know how exactly it'll react. So today I've already pre-done my kits. So the only reason why this one's kind of yellow is they have a 3-month kind of open lifespan, and then you're not going to get a clear pour anymore. I tint everything. That's why I'm using it, because if I'm going to tint it blue, and kind of my thought for this is kind of a bluish, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. It's not going to bother with the structure of it. It's just not going to give you that crystal clear pour. So when it comes out of your container, it's going to be clear. Yeah, when you open up a container, they're always kind of clear like this.
So this one's just been open a while?
Yeah, it's probably been open a couple months.
And which product are you using?
So I am using the Flowcast kits. Yeah. Yeah, so. Because I like the 3-day dry. I like to not have to worry about what's going on, so I can let this sit here for 3 days. When I'm done tonight, before I go home, I will put something over the top so the dust doesn't just fall on it. Because it doesn't matter if you think it's not dusty where you are, dust will get there. So I have my extra large mixing container because I'm messy.
So with those blocks you have up
Yep.
there to hold your wood down,
Yep.
how does the epoxy get underneath there to coat that?
So what I'm going to do is try and just do the main pour, and then you always want to level it out afterwards. It's going to soak into some areas, and I can pour over top. It's not really going to come underneath that, but once you pop it out of the mold like this, it's not done by any means. You can pop it out, you can sand it, and then you can coat it with this, and it'll seal anything else. Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of like this one. We poured it all. These are individual blocks. They weren't glued together or anything like that. I poured it all. That's what's keeping it together, is the epoxy soaks into your wood. So, and then after that, then I sanded it all flat, and I actually put an oil finish on it. So.
So if you're using it as a topping coat,
Yeah.
use this one.
Yeah, so the topping coat is kind of what we put on these, right? Just a thin top coat. It's got the color added to these. You don't have to put color, but you can. So it just depends on what kind of finish and look. And everybody's got a little bit different of a project. So this would be if you're trying to do side tables, or you know, if you wanted to do a big pour, you could just do this, but in a larger scale, right? So yeah, good point. I tuck tape all of my blocks that I have clamped down. Wood floats. I don't care what kind of wood, it floats. Always floats. Our slabs that we had when we did our table pour floated. They were 3 inches thick, they were about 12 inches wide and 8 feet long, and they floated. We screwed them down from underneath and clamped them, so then we could not lose any epoxy, right? Because if your wood floats, then you're never going to get it to be low. So this side here is going to be, I do 2 projects always. One is my major pour, and one is whatever I have left, right? So I always overcalculate my epoxy, because it'll soak in and it'll do a little bit of stuff, right? So
Is there a formula?
there is a formula, and it's so fun.
Imagine it is.
So fun. We'll have to write it down, but so you take your board footage, and I Googled this, so it is online. Yeah, I took my board footage of this. So length, width, thickness, times those together, divide them by 144. Oh, my trusty assistant here, Vanna White.
Formula's on the bottom.
Yeah.
Does Epoxy have a program?
They say they do, but you still have to make some calculations to it, right? So I can take whatever open space I have, but I still got to be able to calculate how much wood is filling it in, right? So everybody can take one and pass around. This is a little tip sheet that we've made up. On the back has our formula. Epoxy is a Canadian company. They're out of Winnipeg. So we work really closely. If there was questions or thoughts or whatever, you can totally let us know or give them a call. They're wonderful. So it does show you in the back. So I kind of calculated out with what I have going on. I'm going to need about 3 liters. Definitely more than what I need, but I only really accounted for my big piece, and I just let the little pieces be. So that's why I have it blocked off, and I have this. So whatever I have left is going to be poured in here. So these little pieces that aren't blocked down, because they're little, I have hot glue gun them. So they're now hot glue gun to that. So we're going to see if they float. This is my first hot glue gun test. So I keep being told it works. On this side, these are clamped. Everything else is loose because I'm hoping that my leftover epoxy, yeah, come on in and see. I'm hoping my leftover epoxy will make them float into a layer. And then once it's dried, I can mix more and pour it again on top. And around the,
Your 72 hours?
yeah, I will wait the 72. There is a way that you can do it in between, but I'm not that risky.
I thought your epoxy could be completely cured.
You can, as long as you might have to do a little bit of sanding in between or something like that. Yeah, something that it sticks to, but.
So what's your plan?
My plan?
Yeah.
My plan is to mix and pour this. And then we'll see what's left, and I'll pour it in here.
I see.
Yeah. So,
are
yep.
you planning to just cover it?
This I'm going to
Yes.
cover all the way.
But how high are you going to go?
I am going to go just above this, so then it kind of soaks into the wood and kind of seals off the wood. So I measured this piece. It's about 1.25 inches thick. Yeah. So if I wanted it to float a little bit, I would just pull up my blocks, and then I can push it up and down and get it to cover the whole thing. Yeah. A little bit of playing, but that's why I tuck tape these. So then when, the same as like the mold here, when I'm done with them, they'll knock off. And they're not going to stick to the wood because they're not now epoxied to my piece.
So your plan is to use the flow cap.
Yeah.
Do your main pour.
Yeah.
Remove the blocks and use a thin pour.
Yeah, over top at the end. Yep.
If
Yeah.
you like where your blocks are, if
Yeah.
you're up a little bit, is that?
It's going to show so when I pour it, you'll see that it'll kind of form around this, and it's going to leave that indent. So when I'm done, I'm going to have to sand it kind of flat before I pour my thin pour over top of it. Yeah. Yeah. So this is my A. People will reuse their containers. If I'm going to do lots, I will mark like an A, and then I always mix A in here, and I'll put them into a Ziploc bag. If I'm doing kind of like this, a 1 pour, then I will just pour it. And they do get a little gungy after a while, and I haven't figured out a great way to clean them. They tell me they can be cleaned, and I'm sure you could wipe it out enough times to clean it. At some point, it's just too much time. So.
After you just let it dry, you just peel it, isn't it?
If you mix it in here, so if I was going to take my B and mix it in here, then it'll peel off. But because I've just put my A in, and I don't ever put A and B in the same container at the same time. So I measure A in one container, B in another. So.
So the clock has started.
No, not yet. I only got one in. Now the clock will be started.
Okay.
And with the thick pour, your pot life, so it could sit in this pot for a while, like 2 hours. The more you have, the shorter your pot life gets. Like when we did the 30 liter, I think we had an hour kind of in our garbage can. So it's not like you're rushing. Don't think you got to rush on this. When you rush is when you do the thin pour because you've only got 4 hours of working time. So your pot life is 20 minutes. So,
But you're not mixing that much anyhow.
you don't mix that much, right? So if you can mix 20 liters of the thin pour stuff if you're doing a big table and you want to clear it, but you don't have to by any means. Most people don't. I think the most I've ever cleared is probably 5 or 6 liters at a time. So now it's in here and now you just mix. So I mix until, because it was kind of 2 different colors, I mix until it all looks like one. It's like adding cocoa to baking. You mix until it's all in. And they do say like a couple minutes of good mixing. If you had a big thing, you could put a little mixer on the drill, only with the thick pour stuff. If you're doing the thin pour stuff, you can't. If you whip that and you got bubbles in your mixture, you got bubbles when you pour. One way to get out of the bubbles is you can use a heat gun, or some people will use a torch with the thin pour stuff. With this, I don't recommend it until you're at least 24 hours later. So this is going to be, you got that cut back there? Good. This is going to be runny for at least 30 hours. So because it's the thick pour stuff, so it's a 72-hour dry. So it's not going to start tacking up until about 36 hours, right? So
I know when I did it, I had it left over and I just kept pouring it in all day long.
Yeah.
A little bit at a time until I finally got it covered.
yeah. So
I didn't know if I could do that, but it worked.
Yes. If you're pouring from the same mixture.
Yeah.
So if you mix this and I decide I didn't mix enough, you're kaput. You mix more than you want because you can't add more unless you let it kind of cure.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not being like, I'm short, I'm going to mix another 10 liters. That's no, 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 no. You have whatever you've mixed. So now that I've stirred this, I can't mix up another liter or whatever because your batch timing is off. Right? So because it's all chemical reaction, the timing is off. So when you do multiple colors, and I'm going to do 2 or 3 colors because that's fun, you always use from the same big batch. That's why I use a big pail, right? I'm going to pour this into my trusty little cups and make some different colors. I like to leave a little bit of clear left over just in case I need to add more of one color or something like that. Then same idea. I can add more clear to whatever so then it can build it up. Yeah. So I don't know if everybody wants to look and see what I got going on. It just looks like mixed epoxy, right? So there's nothing special about it. It's all just mixed together.
Get it on your pants and forever.
Yeah, that's why I'm in my trusty little apron. I've got it on my shoes before and it looks like a spot. So from here, now I'm going to add some to my containers. So
there is directions in there on how long you should mix it, isn't it?
yes, yeah, if you were to read the instructions, I feel like I've mixed for minutes, but I maybe have not. It is the thinner stuff, definitely, when you mix it, you can tell. It always goes clear, but one is a bluish kind of color and one is a clear color. So when you mix them together, it becomes
One color, yeah.
clear.
Also, until it's mixed, it has a quite a smoky up to it.
Yeah, yeah, until you've mixed it fully, it doesn't look clear at all. So this is going to look yellow because obviously my one batch had yellow in it. So I'm going to...
And over its prime, it doesn't hurt it, it'll still cure.
It'll still cure being over its prime. They do say it's a 2-year shelf life kind of deal, so...
After it's open?
They shelf life, but not after. This has probably been open about 1.5 years. And I know it'll still cure because I've used it already to test it. But they just say that 3 months, so then you get your crystal clear image, right? Because if you didn't get crystal clear and you wanted it, then you're in trouble. but I'm not doing crystal clear. We're gonna add some fun colors because that's what I do. Okay, so I want one base color. So I'm gonna use this as my clear, and I'm gonna save that for later in case I need it. Or if I wanna use it on this side and make other colors. So I like I said, I like to use metallics, but I am gonna use a drop of this blue because it's fun to use. And I might put that in there. It's all about fun. So I'm gonna add one drop into my thing. That's a little bit more than a drop, but you can kind of see it, right? Just so you guys can see how much I put in.
Oh, yeah.
And then what kind of color that's gonna go to. Right, so I didn't put very much in, and now we've got almost a solid, like almost a solid blue. When I pour that out, because it's in such a big container, it might not look as solid. But it is still like, that wasn't very much. And so that's all mixed in there. And that's why I have so many containers, because I'm going to do that many colors. I could pour that in and then add more color to that container, but I like to, as you can see, I like to reuse all of my plastic. So I'm going to add a little bit of metallic. The metallic is still strong, but not as strong.
Will alcohol clean that stuff up?
Denatured alcohol is what they tell me. Now, I have yet to find denatured alcohol. So, can you see better there? Perfect. Okay. Metallic is a lot harder to mix in. I don't know if you guys can kind of see. It kind of gives that swirl look to it, right? So you can kind of see as I'm mixing it that it's swirling, and see, that's why you have a table. And that's why there's plastic on the floor. They're like, do you think you're gonna drop? I'm like, 100% I'm gonna drop.
Yeah.
My shoe will be left there. It'll be no big deal. But now I need you to come clean this, please.
Her shoe will be on the floor.
Lady. What do you need? Nothing. But you're gonna have to like paper towel it later. I am, but they're not falling for it, you guys. I just don't understand. So now I've got epoxy on my glove. So I got more.
I've actually cleaned those up with just ice alcohol.
Thanks, Tegan.
Rubbing alcohol.
Does it actually work good? Okay.
And I buy it by the gallon, so I use it all the time.
What was that again?
It's just rubbing alcohol, basically.
Oh, okay.
So he's saying that rubbing alcohol will help clean the containers and.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Change your hands too, if you get it on your hands.
Oh, that's no fun. So I have, what I'm looking at here behind me is some of my colors. I flip them upside down so I can actually see their names.
Metallics?
These are all metallics. Behind me, if I step aside, this is kind of a sample board of the metallics. So I'm going to mix a little bit of a new one we have, which is an emerald. Just a little bit of green, because blue and green make fun colors. If I wanted to, I could mix, and I might even do that yet. There's a white one that's called Pearl. And I'm going to add a little bit of that into my blue. And then when they mix together and we pour them out, you're going to be able to see that there's kind of two different ones within. So
what are those powders made from? Do they actually have like a metal component in it?
I'm going to say no, but I have no idea.
Yeah. they do have their own characteristic.
Yes, because when you mix it together, that pearl,
Yeah.
it kind of makes it. If I use like a white solid pigment,
Oh,
you would get like a lighter blue, but because I used like a metallic, it kind of gives its own little,
Perfect.
right? So when I pour that, it's gonna look different. So we're gonna mix up the green and then we're gonna just do some pouring and see what we got. Ooh, that's a full container. It's literally like playing with paint or something as a child. The only thing I do hazard, only because I've done it a few times, is to know a little bit, like when you're mixing colors together, what they kind of looked like together. So I tried to do like a white and blue and red. I got a lot of pink. It was just one of those things that I didn't quite put the thought into, like what this would look like when I mixed them together. And I was like, oh yeah, when you add white to something, it becomes pink. So I'm gonna pour this metallic. Yeah, exactly. Something that you should think about when you're doing it. Okay, so I'm gonna pour the metallic one first because it is also the most fun. So I'm just gonna pour it and you guys can kind of see, and you can kind of come in after and kind of see what that looks like once it's been poured.
So will the final come out close to the shading and stuff?
No, not necessarily. Because, well, now we're on red tape and now it's not in a small container. Now it's all spread out, so it's gonna look a little bit different. Oh, am I too far away? No, you're good. Oh, okay.
Interesting.
So now you could play with it if you wanted, but it's not gonna stay, right? So if you play with it and make all your fun swirls, you gotta remember it's gonna be like this for 36 hours. And it's not gonna do anything. I tried writing my name once, it still didn't do anything. Even around the 20-hour mark, I still didn't get my name on that piece of wood.
So when you pour more in there, isn't that it's all gonna kind of mix together, or will it
So
separate it?
if I'm gonna do the blue next because I wanna mix that kind of together to kind of give me that sort of look. When I pour the green in, I'm gonna pour the green in and I'm not gonna mix it.
Okay, it'll stay on top?
It won't stay on top. It'll kind of soak in together, but it's not gonna separate as much. So like when I pour the blue, and you'll kind of see when I pour this, like how it kind of looks, like they go, and it does kind of give it its own. So if I didn't mix that, it would look like it's a river running through there. Right? It kind of isn't solid, right? So if you're trying to do ocean, which a lot of people do, I haven't perfected it. I think it's wonderful. There are some people out there that are super creative with it. So I poured it over top of my pieces here. If I don't sand that, that blue will stay. But now that it's on here, if it's soaking into the holes and stuff, it's gonna go in and make blue, like fill in the blue, right? So it's now becoming a wood filler to say. So like this one, I'm gonna just pour a little bit on top because it's kind of like an island. I like the beach. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I like the beach. Darlene, I'm stepping in my epoxy. So I don't know if we wanna, what do you think? Should we add another little bit of more color to the green? We have so many colors. I added emerald. Let's see. Maybe we'll do some jungle. Oh yeah, jungle's right here. So we'll do a little bit of blue and green in one container. You sharing? Darlene used to work for us for about 12 years, so that's where all of the fun comes from. 12 years or 15 years? How long were you here? 15 years. No, see?
A long time.
Long enough, and she still likes us that she comes back to hang out. So I'm gonna mix that in with the other one. Just makes the color a little bit darker. Kind of, you can custom create, like I said, all of your own colors.
You didn't put any metallic in the dark blue, did you?
No, in the dark blue, that was just the solid blue.
Yeah.
I'm trying to step around my epoxy on the floor, but it's not necessarily gonna work. So I'm just gonna pour some of this in. And honestly, you're not gonna be able to tell until you break it apart what kind of flow you have, right? Like what this is really gonna look like. Some of it you'll be able to kind of get an idea, but what's underneath, you're never gonna see until you break it out. So The people that are doing some of it are doing it in such a large scope that they don't care, right? So if you're doing a 3-inch table, it is what it is. You don't really have a lot of, thanks, Vanna. You're welcome. She still likes me. So in a moment, I'll get you guys if you want to come close, and you can kind of see now all of the different colors are kind of in there, right? So if you want to come and take a look, what I'm going to do.
So the one that the last one you're pouring,
Yep.
kind of pushes the other ones out.
It does push them out a bit, yep.
And
Yeah.
then you get to see that,
Yeah, so like right here, I poured a lot of green, and you can kind of see the red tape underneath. Because I like to play, before you guys, you got that? Perfect. So now I'm going to just kind of play with it and make some swirls. I should say that I did level this beforehand. I had a helper level it, so hopefully he did a good job. So now I'm not going to do too much more to that, right? I've got my clear still, so I can now add the clear to kind of fill it in. And it's going to take on that color. I might mix the clear in a little bit, just because we know that it's not clear, it's yellow. But I think that it'll kind of mix in with this and kind of add. And if I wanted to, and I'm going to just go like this. So see the wood change color with it? Right? So the wood is now soaking into the wood, so it's filling all the holes. So if your wood had some rot or anything like that, it's soaking all in.
It would bubble like crazy.
Yeah, it does. It's bubbling like mad. I wanted to be able to see my little island over here that I got going on. So that's kind of why I also did a little bit more of the clear. Yeah. I got more clear in my pail. This is kind of a lot of different things happening at once with this pour, just so I could show you guys like what all of the different things that you can do. This piece.
What would happen if you had some grooves in that and you put a color in there and then put your epoxy on top?
You want to try it? We can try it. I know what'll happen, but you want like a little bit of the blue?
Sure.
A little bit of the blue and maybe just around some of this?
Sure.
Maybe if my blue will come out. So the epoxy is going to take it on. And then we'll pour a little bit more of the clear. So because it's not mixed, it's kind of more just sitting there, right?
It gives it more intense.
Yeah. So what we can do is go like this and mix it within your piece, right? So if all of a sudden you decided that you wanted more color, you can't really take color out.
Effect on the island.
Yeah. You can't take color out, but you can add more color. You just have to want to mix it in because you can see all of the different colors within here, right? So around the island here is a lot more clear because you can see the tuck tape underneath. And where I put the blue is more solid.
So if you wanted something to stand out, same thing with metallic, you can just add it in there and stir
Yeah,
it in?
yeah. Yeah, if I wanted to add a little bit of like, this one here, it's called caviar. It's like a blackish color. We wanted to make our own little. So this is going to kind of stay on top unless you mix it. So it looks like a powder now on top of your epoxy, right? So I put it right in here for any of you that want to see. So I will just kind of stir it over. So when we break this out and you guys can come back and see it, you'll know that we had that in there. And it might not show too much unless you get it mixed in. But it'll be just on top. It'll be like some black. So when people are doing some of the waves and stuff like that, they'll put a white, right? Like, again, ocean scene, if you wanted some of those rolling waves, you can add a little bit of white in there and kind of half mix that to get a little bit of that ocean Yeah, go for it. So I need to add a lot more clear to build this up, right? Or else we're going to be short. Because it won't be as tall as my layer. So I'm pouring it, as you can see, I get it everywhere. So it kind of moves everything around, right? See, I don't have that much left. Ha, my math was great.
So you never pour it right off the bat and try to cover it?
To seal it? Like, are you talking like a seal pour, or?
Well, no, because you're still below your level,
Yeah.
right?
I'm below my level, I'm below my level. It is what it is, I can't mix more.
No, I realize
Right,
that,
but-
do you do that on purpose, or do you try to?
Sometimes it's on purpose, sometimes it's not. Just depends on what my effect is, right? This, I wasn't too worried. I do have some of this color over here, the green still, and I can pour that in. Usually I try and get it as level as possible. If anything, I want it to be the wood less than the epoxy. Right? Epoxy is a lot harder to sand than the wood is.
Yeah.
Usually, right? So if I'm going to do anything, I'll leave my epoxy low, and then I'll try and sand my wood to it.
Oh, okay, yeah. I see what you're saying.
Right?
Then just put a top coat on.
Okay. Come check it out tomorrow. So that's kind of usually what I do. I do try and make all of my pieces the same height. That doesn't always happen. As you can see, my little island is gone.
How long will you wait now to do a repour or another pour?
Me, I will wait until it's cured.
Yeah.
If I'm going to do the UV, I have to wait till it's cured. I can't do a thin pour. I can't remember exactly what it says on the box, but you could, once it's still tacky, you can mix and then pour the same stuff. Be in mind, this needs to be a 1/2 inch thick for it to cure. Flow cast needs to be a minimum of a 1/2 inch thick to cure. So that's why they have the thin pour, right? And the SPR is a little bit less than that because it's designed for smaller projects. So now,
For this one,
yeah,
this pour is done right now.
yeah.
So what will be your plan going forward?
Going forward, so my next steps will be cure it, let it cure,
Yeah.
see where I end up. If I want to, I can then pull these off and I could pour, because it's still in my mold, and I didn't check, we're not leaking. I could pour a layer of clear over top, right, of the UV, and then it would be solid on top. It would be a solid epoxy on top. Then when you break it out, you just have to remember when you break anything out of a mold, your edges are sharp. So you can either trim it with a table saw, cut it square again, or you can sand it.
So,
Me, I'm gonna wait,
yeah.
and I'm gonna pop it out. And then what I'll do is, once it's out, I will trim it to the size I want, block it up on these, and pour my clear coat, and it's gonna run over the top and fall down, but I make sure everything's level because you can't build it up. So once it's out of the mold, you're not gonna make it a 1/4 inch thick. You're only gonna get, like what we have here, whatever stays on top. Other than that, then it runs down the sides.
Is it advisable to think that this is going to be your top?
No, this will never be your, oh, if you flip it over?
Yeah, I was
No.
going to say, so like why don't you break it out of the mold and you look at it and you
Yeah.
go, hey, I like this.
Yeah, but you still have work to do. Even though you want to flip it over, some people have poured that way and they've made the bottom the top. But you're clamped down so the wood isn't, it might be easier to sand, it might be a little bit less work that way, but you're still going to have a lot of work to do to get either side ready to go. I have a piece, it's actually behind you, kind of standing by that light. Yes, that one. So that is, and it's hard to see, if you look at the edges, it's more than one layer. And I can show that later to you what it looks like.
Yeah, so you poured clear and then you had metallic in one pour.
That's actually glitter. That would be my only glitter pour of. Yeah. So now we can't really see my island because it's so solid around there. So depending on how you, and that part of that is because my island is shorter than the rest of my pieces.
This is a better one, if you can see the different pores with the rocks in it. We learned on this one.
Rocks are really porous. You have to seal them before you pour
Spray them with Ferrithane or spray them with something.
Really?
something. They are super
Bubbles
porous.
won't show up.
Porcelain too.
Porcelain too?
Porcelain, yeah,
Porcelain
they
as
porous.
well. That's, yeah.
Is that worse than the wood, really?
Yeah,
Way worse.
way worse than the wood. Yeah. Another one that is actually really bad that I had done a few coasters in is flowers. Flowers, and they float like mad, so it was really hard to do. But so I'm trying to get my island so we can see it, and I'll wait till tomorrow to do too much more. If I wanted some of this blue, like you can maneuver it now as much as you want, or as little as you want. Because I want to get my shells and stuff down here, I'm going to use the rest of my green, just for fun.
And if you wanted to expose that island some more, you could just pour some clear on top of it if you had.
If I had more clear, yeah. Yeah. I did pour the clear on, and then it just kind of mixed in. But I'm trying to, tomorrow I'll be able to pull out, pull away a little bit some of the solid, because I can maneuver it, like I said, as much as I want. Right? You see how much fun that is? You just have to remember, the more you mix, the more you mix them together. I'm going to put some of these on top.
Don't forget not to scratch your nose with that finger.
Yeah, right? This is why I have gloves on. So now I'm going to just, what I could do is I could take this, pour it in here, and then just mix another batch for this side, right? Because I just want to make the shells stay down and stuff, because those aren't glued. So I'm going to kind of do a layered look on this side. So anything that you want to float will, but it's only going to be really, really thin. And then once it's cured, you can pour as much as you want, and you don't have to clamp them. So that's part of a layering effect, right? So if you were trying to do, like I said, flowers was one of them. We had them in coasters, and you had to pour a really thin layer and then pour again, or else they would float, or have a way to sand up a flowered coaster. So I'm gonna just, now we saw kind of how green that was inside, and it's gonna not really show, and this is gonna be like the thinnest, littlest pour. So I might not get it to cure because it's not gonna be a 1/2 inch.
It has to be a 1/2 inch to cure?
Yep.
Even over a bunch of days?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference?
If it doesn't cure with, or start tacking up, I didn't think about that when I poured it. If it doesn't start tacking up in about 36 hours, I'm gonna put a heater to it.
Okay.
And I'm gonna try and, because what happens is when it's too thin, your chemical reaction doesn't happen, right? So this, without the chemical reaction being able to happen, might not cure. So that's where you would add heat, so then you can create that chemical reaction. If it doesn't cure, I break it open, I slide off all the epoxy and try again. Real expensive way to do it, but you know, it is just another, it happens, you know, when you're trying to do multiple things. But any of my leftovers now, as I get them, I can put them on one of the pieces. So that is kind of all of the epoxy. You know what? I think it's because I poured half of it on the floor. Maybe. So, yeah, so in a couple days, this side, I will mix up some more epoxy. But now I know that my seashells and my sand dollars aren't going to float, right? So they will be stuck in there, and then I can do whatever I want and make them stay. Any more questions?
How did you seal the joints on here? I know you've got
Oh, yeah.
duct tape. But
Yep.
did you
Great
put
question.
silicone in there, or-
Yes. So watertight is key. So all of my pieces are individual. I pre-drilled the holes so that my screws don't split my pieces of wood. Everything was tuck taped. Every single inch was then siliconed, all of my edges.
On the inside or the outside?
Inside.
Inside?
I do the inside because if it leaks through and behind, you're just wasting epoxy in behind all of your joints, and then it's harder to break it apart, right? So on the inside, and it's not going to stick to the silicone.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a good point. So this will be a fun test to see how well I did.
So you'll be going with just some really light color
Yeah.
on the rest of the pour on this one, so
Yeah.
you can always see the shells. Of
Yeah,
course, right?
yeah. This is not the first one I've done with shells, and I have yet to master a good look. I put the sand in there beforehand, and then I forgot that when I pour the epoxy, it displaces it. So now, if I want to try and get the sand back, I probably can't get it back into a spot where it's not going to look like it was poured on, right?
Could you add some sand right now?
I could add some sand right now. It's upstairs in a container. Thanks, Tegan. I love having people around. They're
So
the
you
best to
didn't
me.
hot glue those shells down.
No, I didn't, because I kind of wanted them to,
If they'll come up,
if they'll come up, then that's okay, because then on the underside, they're probably, honestly, they're probably hollow underneath if the epoxy hasn't.
So you're not going to get bubbles from them?
From the shells? No. Because the shells should be a solid. Oh, still good. Thank you. Perfect. So it'd be kind of like sprinkling on a little bit of metallic, so it's going to go into some of those spaces that I poured in, but it's probably a better way to do it this way than
because then the epoxy doesn't push it out of the way.
exactly. Yeah. Then our epoxy isn't, again, one of those things that you kind of forget about as you're doing things. Every time I pour, it's something different. Every time there's always something that I forgot about, or, you know, I'm like, well, I should have known that, but I forgot about it, or, you know, you don't really think about it, or something. So we can add a little bit of sand to this, and it's just going to soak in. Might make it really hard to sand the end, but
Interesting.
Are you using a special sandpaper when you're sanding that?
when I sand this, no, I use any old sandpaper. A planer is really tough on epoxy. Planer blades, it can be done. We've done it, but they told me no more. It is so hard that it really dulls your planer blades, and we have a 20-inch planer, and to change out all of the helical heads on it, they were not that happy with me.
So when you sand it, then are you wet sanding? Or
If I'm doing a finish coat like this, I have wet sanded it. Either I'm not very good at it, or it just didn't make enough of a difference for me to notice, because I always put an oil on. So once you sand it, it goes milky like that. So this is the bottom half of the piece. So I sanded this to about, I don't know, maybe 320. So I'd have to keep going to make it clear again, right? So this, I'd have to really keep going, and you can kind of see the shiny spots are where it was low, but I keep it unsanded so people know that this is what sanding will do. As soon as you touch sandpaper to the epoxy, you're going milky.
so you're going to what, 2,000 when you sand it?
This side I did about 2,000, 1,000 to 2,000. I had to be careful because of the wood, because to seal the wood, you can't be at a 2,000 grit. So when you're doing wood and epoxy, if it was like my coffee table at home and I sanded the whole thing, I did that to 4,000, because I didn't put another coat over top. If you want it to go back shiny, you've only got a few options. First one's re-pour. Second one is a polishing compound of like a car waxing polishing compound you can put over top, or like a spray lacquer or something. It's really hard to do to make it, if you're not putting a polishing compound or repouring, if you're spraying something over top to get it to be level, you have to be really good at it. That's not me. And that's not most people.
Well, an oil finish due to epoxy.
This is oiled. The epoxy is actually oiled. So an oil finish doesn't actually go into the epoxy because it can't soak in. But because the oil has, this is like an Osmo oil, or the Livos oil we have here, it can't soak in, but it will make it go back to being clear. So when I did it, I did the wood that I needed to, how I need to finish the oil, buffed it all in, everything like that. Any leftover residue on the epoxy, I came with like a white cloth, and I just buffed that out. So then it's whatever takes into whatever porous parts of the epoxy, but it's not going to be nearly as much. But this is how I find the easiest way to finish, because
Wet sand that with your finish?
you could if you're. A lot of people don't like wet sanding unless they're doing woodwork all the time. You love wet sanding because you're really good at it, but most people, like at home, a wet.
I don't get dust as long as I'm wet sanding. I don't
Yeah,
get dust.
yeah. So, but yeah, you totally could. With the oil finish, it's kind of like a wet sand because you're buffing in the oil, but still not as much takes to the epoxy because it's not as porous as the wood.
If you were doing like a tube, when you pour the epoxy in, will it force the air out?
Yes. Yes. That's what the bubbles are. The bubbles are the air coming out of your wood. Yeah. Yeah. So, any other questions? I'll be around for a while if there's more thoughts that come up, but bye.